What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Filip Latocha, and today we're doing a huge recap of a couple of things that have been happening for the last month and a half, 2 months leading up to the Chicago Triathlon. So this will be a race review with some prefacing items that we will discuss beforehand that kind of led us to the race, how it affected the race ultimately, and some other items affiliated with that. So before we get into it, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're subscribed and watching content. Thanks so much. Love you guys a lot. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, Strava for all sorts of other updates and stuff like that, so you can get ahead of the curve before I make a video on it. So without further ado, let's begin. This is a big recap for the 2023 Chicago Triathlon, but there's a lot of things that happened beforehand that led up to this race. Number one, about, I'd say 30 to 45 days before the race, I had to do some traveling for work. So this kind of put a bit of a damper to my swim and bike training, but the running didn't really, I guess, go poorly. It just did, I guess, in a way, ultimately affect my Chicago Marathon training, which we'll discuss at the very end here. But yeah, went to Vegas for a conference related to my professional career as a cybersecurity analyst. It was a Splunk conference, so got to do some stuff there, just, hang out, be in Vegas, experience 15 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like 30, 40 plus Celsius. I don't know the exact version. I'll put it here somewhere if I remember to do so. But yeah, it was fun being out there, and the caveat of why I mentioned that is that immediately after Vegas, I was committed to going back to Silverthorne, Colorado for an altitude elevation training camp. So basically, I flew in from Chicago to Vegas, stayed in Vegas for about 3-4 days, and then flew into Denver, and then I took a shuttle for about an hour and a half west into the mountains of Silverthorne, or as we're going to call it for this vlog, it's Silco now, right? That's the cool way to say it, I guess, because I can't say Silverthorne. It's Silco. So I went out to Silco. My family ended up joining me a little later. I had some friends and some other peeps come along, and it was just overall a really good time. And now the reason I mention Silco for this, for those who've watched this training vlog before, is that Silco is basically a mountain town surrounded by mountains and other little towns in the area, and you're about 40 minutes northeast of Leadville. So for those who know Leadville, that's like 10,000 feet elevation, and it's like a great place to live, and that's where like Lifetime hosts those 100-mile trail runs and things like that. I digress. Point there is Silco sits at about 8,700 to 9,000 feet in elevation. So it really puts you in a weird elevation point where training is a lot more difficult than usual for your altitude camp, but living at that elevation also provides passive benefits by just existing there if you're walking and just kind of doing things, because you're still feeling the effects of getting that elevation into your system. And the main point there is because, again, you are at elevation. I'm not a scientist or professional physical therapist or anything like that, or anyone that's associated with sports medicine, so I'm using free language here, so don't quote me on any of this. But the idea here is that when you train at elevation, what's happening is that you end up breathing in thinner oxygen, and as a result, you're not getting a sufficient blood flow through your body. So what your body does as a result is you start developing more red blood cells to compensate for the fact that you have lower oxygen in the environment. So what happens here is now your body's learning to adapt to having thinner air and less blood oxygen in your system. And when you come down to somewhere like Chicago or somewhere even lower to sea level, now you have a higher, you have more air capacity in your blood as a result, and you just end up being able to put out, better results in some of these places, because you're just you're breathing better, I guess, in this case. This is gonna get clipped, I know for a fact, but anyways, the point here is that I decided to live in Silco for a month and try to get some of the benefits of altitude training and bring it down to Chicago and some residual races that will be occurring before the Chicago Marathon. It's likely I will lose all of these benefits before the Chicago Marathon in about 6 weeks, even though I've lived there for about a month now this year. I think the longest I can keep the benefits will be about 2 to 2.5 weeks. So don't quote me on that as well. It's not for certain. But anyways, point there is, once at Silco, I was focused on getting some of the benefits for the Chicago Triathlon in a similar way I did in 2021. And at Silco, this is kind of just the big summary of things. It was a good time overall. I did basically run almost every single day. There might have been like 1 or 2 days I didn't. We went on like a hike. So it was like sort of like an active recovery, I guess you can say. I swam as much as possible, both open water and at the pool that was at the rec center close to the place we were staying. The one thing I didn't do was bike a whole lot. I mean, I did bike, and there were like instances where I would use it as like commuting and whatnot, but there's like a typical lap I do around Lake Dillon, which is the area over there. That's about a 25 to 30 mile bike ride, and that's like kind of the acclimation, the pedigree bike ride that I typically do before the Chicago Marathon, or the Chicago Triathlon, and I didn't end up doing it, which made me nervous going into the Chicago Triathlon, because I like to do that distance and a little bit more before you do the 24.9 bike during the Chicago Triathlon. So again, fast forward, we're done with the month over there now. We're driving back home to Chicago, and 72 to about 108 hours before the race, so 3 to 4 days before the race, we're back home in Chicago. We go, or in Algonquin in this case, and now we go and stay in Chicago for the weekend. Just, we got a room at the Palmer House. It's kind of chilled out. And I ended up signing up for the Chicago Super Sprint with my friend, who wanted to do her first triathlon. So I said, hey, what the heck, if you're doing the Super Sprint, I'll do the Super Sprint too. Because I did the Super Sprint in 2021, and it was a bit of a logistical chaos, but it's a great warm-up for the actual Chicago Triathlon. So why not, I said, right? And the Super Sprint overall, the whole weekend kind of shaped up like this, and the theme is probably going to resonate, or you're going to see what is going on here. It was very windy during the entire weekend, and as a result, 2 things happened. One, any sort of swim segment during the entire weekend ended up either having to be revisited or canceled. And then 2, anything that was involved with headwind and tailwind in Chicago either benefited you and then would bite you in the back ultimately. So those are the 2 things that ended up happening. And during the Super Sprint, the swim that would have been like less than a quarter mile now turned into like 125 meter like splash and dash. So we were like literally just running on the water, and sometimes people tried to jump in and do some freestyle, but the water was like waist deep, so you just basically ran through the water, and like that was kind of what happened. So that was something to note in terms of splash and dash. So that might have been like literally the closest we've been to the water the entire Chicago Triathlon weekend. So that happened. It was okay, fine. The bike segment there was good. I felt pretty clean on the bike. Nothing unusual to report on it. Just kind of, rolling with the punches on that. And then during the run, the only thing I would note is that I wasn't nearly running as fast as I was in 2021. And I'll get into this probably closer to the end of this video. But the point here is that some of my times kind of slowed down. But overall, each leg of the sport is still remaining consistent, so there's kind of like a plateau that's occurring, which isn't a bad thing, but it's something at my age that I'm kind of concerned with, because I'm only 30 years old. I should be able to start progressing just a little bit more and more, and there's little things that I need to do in my life that would allow for those kind of changes. So we'll discuss that more either in this video or another one. We'll get into it. So that was the Chicago Super Sprint. My friend, she did a very good job, I think, overall during the race. Again, she was very nervous about the swim overall. She didn't have a wetsuit that was going to fit her at the time of the race. But thankfully, with the splash and dash, we didn't really need a wetsuit. You just needed to kind of trudge through the water and just have a good time with it. So at the end of the day, the water was fine. The bike was fine as well. She was just using like her hybrid bike for that. But, it's just a super sprint. You're just doing it to test the race kind of conditions, testing yourself in transition and things like that. So no pressure whatsoever, right? So she rode that, she did the run, everything went fine. And just from here on out, now it's just you kind of go into bigger and better things, right? You have to like self-actualize with yourself that like, hey, I could have done better on the bike, or hey, I could have done better during this run and I was upset about this thing and like I want to be more competitive. It's like, that's good. That's like a good reason to continue doing triathlon, because now you're seeing these little things and you want to improve and just kind of go from there, right? So that was just some of the things she self-actualized. And again, same thing for me as well. Like, hey, my run was slightly slower this year than it was in 2021 and even in 2019. What's going on? These are like things I'm asking myself as we go along. So that was the day there. You know, everything else went just kind of smooth. We went to, you know, the expo. We got dinner and all that. And then it's Chicago Triathlon morning for the Olympic distance. That morning, I had predicted correctly that the swim was going to get canceled. And now the reason for that was, again, the choppy waters all weekend were just not great, but I understand why Lifetime or the organizers ultimately did it. It is that there was a lot of beginners. I think it was like over 30 to 40% of the Olympic athletes that day, or the Olympic triathlon distance athletes, were brand new to the sport. So, based on what I saw in the water, like, I don't want to boast or anything, but, like, I would have been probably okay doing that swim, because, like, you just kind of have to know that you have to, like, swim sideways, you have to do some sighting a certain way. Like, I don't think I would have had an issue fighting with that water for 30, 40 minutes, however long it would have taken me to do that particular swim course. But I know beginners would probably not know what to do in this scenario where the waves are crashing on, like, the coastline or the bank of the Monroe Harbor, where there's like steel, you know, barriers protecting the concrete from getting, you know, suffering from erosion or anything like that. So you can easily get slammed onto that. You can get a wave that can slam you on top of or back onto the concrete panel, and you can get seriously injured. So I get it. I understand. I just think that if they told me specifically, like, hey, you can still do the swim, I'd say, heck yeah, let's do this. But anyways, I digress. Swim was canceled. So any kind of PRs or anything of that sort was sort of out of the window, except for one condition, which we'll talk about soon. So first thing we should probably write down is the times from 2022, which was last year, just to kind of give you the lay of the land of what happened last year versus how I did this year. So first things first, 2022, the swim has me at about 26:16. That is still a PR in my book. That is one of my fastest swims in open water thus far for about 1,500 to 1,600 meters, yards, whatever the distance was for the Chicago Triathlon. The bike was about 1:16:06. So hour 16 on the bike, nothing unusual at this point. And then the run here was at about 41:39. So I think it's been established that these times in 2022 were slightly slower than what I did in 2021. No big deal. So these are not PR times. Let's make that clear. The swim definitely is still a PR untouched, which is cool. And now we're going to talk about the times from this year. So there was no swim. No big deal, right? For the most part. The bike. Did I PR on the bike? The answer is... yes, we did. We cut off about roughly 15 to 20 seconds on the bike, which, all things considered, not the greatest PR in terms of the last 2 years, because, again, there was a whole swim done beforehand, and I still managed to bike this time versus this bike, which was a little bit slower. Caveat here, of course, is because I wasn't biking nearly as much in Silverthorne or practicing on the bike, putting in the time in the saddle. I'll take this time for what it is, but I'm not totally happy about it, but I'm also not mad about it. If I got something to like 117, 118 or something low like that, I would be a little bit more concerned. And again, I am using a bike that's about 9 years old now, so getting a new bike is going to be something on my radar, but I'm not blaming the progress here on the bike. Like, we're not doing this. We're doing a little bit of this, right? So this is my fault that this time is still pretty low. So we're going to fix this, whether it's, everything from micro things like diet, my weight, the time I spent on the bike, whether it's biking outside using Zwift or anything like that nature. Those are things I need to work on if I want to improve my bike time on the triathlon. Because if we're going to be completely honest with ourselves, the triathlon really is just an overglorified bike race with, as Lance Armstrong once said, a shower and a brief jog. So, that being said, we got to improve this. And this is not a PR, but it is better than the last year, right? And then the run itself. Did we PR in the run? You guys get to take a quick guess as to whether I did. Because the answer is, I did. It's 41:22 versus 41:39. So it's a bit of a couple of seconds difference in terms of the run. So spending all that time running just to break a few seconds and then losing a whole minute or something like that on the bike kind of puts us in a weird predicament, right? Now, the total time, of course, during this race is, of course, 2 hours, 33 minutes. And I believe it's this. I don't recall if this is a PR necessarily, but we cannot compare that time to what is listed here, which is going to be 2 hours, 8 minutes, and 19 seconds. So, you're probably wondering, Phil, why are we making this comparison of 2022 times to 2023 times? Well, it's just, first of all, it's interesting data, right? To see that, like, the swim and the bike will improve naturally, even though I didn't swim, by like a smidgen. But it's also worth noting that even with the whole swim beforehand, the improvement was just gradual. And in a way, you can argue that I did worse this year, even without the swim, than I did last year with a swim. There's a couple of things that can be involved there too, right? Like maybe after the swim, I took more nutrition on the bike versus this year where I took like one goo gel and that was all I did during the race because I didn't feel like I needed more nutrition. Micro things, right? So the only way we can really be fair about this comparison overall is talking about what happened in 2019. And now for those who might know, in 2019, the swim was also canceled. So we don't have a swim time and we have a run bike time that's exactly going to follow the same format as 2023. That's what I want to say, 2023. So let me give you those times just to show you why I'm concerned about my overall times here. So in 2019, no swim. The bike was hour 12, 14 minutes. Or it's an hour, 12 minutes, 14 seconds. That's 3 minutes faster than I did this year. And the run, take a guess, is 42:09, which puts us at 2:06:11. So, a couple of things to note there is if you do the math here, you're saying, hey Phil, these times don't add up. What I'm not adding here is my transition times. It kind of adds a little bit more to the metric. It is a very important metric, however. But it's worth noting that this time around, during my transition off the bike into the run this year, I actually lost where my spot was for my bike. So I actually spent 2 minutes longer in transition after the bike into the run than I usually do, which in that transition you shouldn't spend a whole lot of time. Spent more time in this transition, so I botched this. This year, I was in incredible physical shape because I did Ironman Madison 70.3 that summer, and I was just coming off that race, already in a high volume, high fitness kind of environment. So all I was doing was just kind of putting in the miles for the Chicago Marathon while continuing the triathlon training. So this just all rolled over really well. And even the run, like despite it being almost a minute less than I did this year, the point there was that I put in a little bit more volume and a little bit of extra work on the bike, and as a result, I cut 3 minutes off this bike, or this bike gained 3 minutes off my 2019 time, but I only gained a few seconds on my 2019 time. So in a way, you can argue that I did the triathlon better in 2019 than I did in 2023, because as a result, there's a 2-minute difference in the overall finishing times. So that's all of our metrics for the Chicago Triathlon. So very mixed, but like the theme is kind of here where overall as I'm getting older and my lifestyle has slightly changed based on my work, where I live now, other factors in life, I need to be a little bit more concerned about putting in, again, more volume, being on my feet more, walking more, and things like that, because the times are slightly slipping. And even when I was like, 25, 26, 27 in 2019, I don't even remember. Even though I was younger, as I'm getting older, I should be getting much more veteran experience on my body, and I should be feeling more comfortable doing these races without as much pain. So the question as to why the times are slipping is kind of related to those kinds of things, whether it's lifestyle, whether it's just priorities with work and like professional development sort of not getting in the way, but also becoming something important, whether it's like, time I spend on my phone, for example, like that could totally do it, right? If you're like playing games or just sitting on social media, that kind of wastes time as well. So again, not a whole lot of this being an issue, more of this being the issue. So as we get into the Chicago Marathon season, it becomes very concerning for me to make sure that this time loss that's happening isn't going to occur during the Chicago Marathon as well. So I'll make a whole video, I think, on that as we go along, just because I think I'm going over time. It's almost 20 minutes into this video. Don't want to, go too crazy on the Chicago Triathlon recap in terms of times, results, experiences like that. But the main takeaways here is that the Silverthorne training camp is super successful for my cardiovascular build, even though I suffer like a maniac at 9,000 feet all the time. There are days where you go through the training camp and you're on a run and all you want to do is just like quit because it's so demoralizing not being able to breathe in the mountains. But then when you come back to like, Algonquin or Chicago or places even lower than that, like let's talk like Texas, like if you're racing in Houston and you're coming from anywhere like Boulder, Denver, like you feel like $1,000,000. It's crazy. So just knowing that that month of work is part of the process and part of the build into something great like good times and good results is something we always look forward to as athletes who can afford to do something like that. And I don't want the Silverthorne training camp to I'm going to look for the words wisely here. Like, I want it to continue creating good results, but I don't want the micro things happening in the background to affect them negatively, whether it's like, bad diet, bad sleep, other factors like that. So I just want to make sure that the training camp does work successfully regardless, because at the end of the day, it does end up being a stay or a workcation kind of scenario. So I'm still working from Silverthorne. It's not like I take a month off from my life and just train, right? Like, I will work from 8 to 4, or in this case it'd be like 7 to 3 because it's an hour back, and then just continue on with my life, maybe try to get a lunch run or some kind of like morning run and have a late day start, like whatever is compatible with the work schedule is kind of what will happen. But yeah, so that's the Silverthorne training camp recap there. And then the Chicago Triathlon, doing 6 of these now in my life. I'm not going to say I have veteran experience on the race, but I kind of know what to expect. I'm more familiar with the courses than usual. I know what open water swimming feels like. I know how the run course goes. I know that on the run I can be an absolute maniac and I will not get passed on the run for the most part when I'm like competing in an age group kind of bracket. And I would like to keep it that way, but I would also like to improve the bike as well so I don't get passed on the bike. And there's a lot of factors there, right? New bike, maybe new cassette on my bike, maybe just more training, more saddle time on the bike would also probably be also important, right? So there's a lot of things to factor there, and as I get older and I start wanting to do triathlon a little bit more, and I want to get back into 70.3 racing, I think it's important to spend some more time on the bike, right? Because I haven't done a 70.3 since Ironman Madison, which is kind of a bummer because I know that race was traumatizingly hard on myself just because of how hot it was that day. Madison just being an absolute toilet to bike through because of all the potholes. Just me having inexperience on the bike and then just absolutely crashing on the run at like mile 7, mile 8, just not being able to take in nutrition. It was a bad day, so that's just something that comes with more experience as it goes along, of staying hydrated the whole time while you're on the bike. being able to put in the hours to train for that, first and foremost, and then just having the mental will to do it all while working, a professional career job. So I'm sure others will tell me like, oh yeah, I do all this stuff and I can do a 140.6 3 times in one day and you're complaining. And like, that's great that you can do that. It's just, I'm getting there, I want to be that guy that goes up to you and goes, hey, I can do 3 Ironmans in one day. I can do 3 Ironmans in one day and still go do my 40 hours a week to 60-hour a week job. Stop complaining. Like, I want to be that guy, but it's so difficult to do, to be like a Superman who can do something like that. But no, we'll get there. First and foremost, that's kind of just, the main important thing for me here was that I got the Chicago Triathlon done in one piece. I didn't get hurt. I didn't get injured. Nothing like that. That was first and foremost. I didn't totally botch any times as of right now, as I look at it and I'm making this video. And I'm still healthy and still training for the Chicago Marathon, even though I am nervous that the sub 3 is totally out of reach this year. It might end up just being a, run to survive kind of race, because the fitness and the speed just hasn't been there this year as a result of what I was just talking about this whole video. So yeah, I think we'll leave the video here. We'll have probably a follow-up in some other fashion or something like that as we go along, but I'll leave the video here. And if you got any questions, comments, concerns, if this is a good recap, cool. If you were bored out of your mind, sorry, you've probably clicked away at this point if you were. If you made it all the way to this video, tell me your favorite breakfast item. And if it's French toast, definitely list what you like on the French toast. But yeah, if we got nothing else, I'll wrap this video up here for now. Plenty more videos to come. I got a huge queue of them that I have to put out in terms of shoe reviews, things I've experienced at Silco related to shoes I was playing around with. So we got a lot that I have to catch up on. So you'll see more videos to come. I'll probably release some like every 48 hours. We'll see. Maybe we'll make it daily. There's so many. But anyways, I digress. Point here is lots of content coming up. This is just the beginning of what's going to be a crazy month or a crazy season of videos. So we'll see what happens. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.